Let's get started. Yesterday we drew a map. Yesterday we talked about Upper Egypt and Lower Egypt, and that is where I want to continue today, along the River Nile. So we know that Egypt is situated along the River Nile, the Nile River. And there are mountains, more of a mountainous region in the south, kind of a higher land, an upper land, and rivers always flow downwards. So the southern part of Egypt is called Upper Egypt, and the northern part of Egypt is called Lower Egypt. If you look on the map, did you all mark this up? Upper Egypt, Lower Egypt, right? And does it make sense to everyone why actually the one that's higher on the map is the lower one? Yeah? Give me a thumbs up if you understand that. That's very important. Okay, very good. So there were more mountains in the south, and then the water would come down and reach the Mediterranean Sea, where the delta is a type of estuary where the water enters the sea. It's a delta of the river. And that was the wettest place of all of them. And when we colored it green because in the delta area, there was wonderful, wonderful place for people to grow things. But it didn't come easy. It didn't come easy because the river did not just have a constant flow of water. It actually changed throughout the year. At the time when there was a lot of rain in the mountains, that rain would pour down and collect in the river, and the river would swell up, and the water start rising inside the river. Eventually it would flow over the banks of the river, and it would cover the land nearby. It was flooding. That's when the river was flooding. And then gradually, as less and less water was coming from the mountain, that flooding stopped and the water receded and went back into the banks. And not only that, but now there was so little water coming that the water levels kept dropping in the river, and it didn't dry out, but it got really, really low. So then water, that part of the year, water was scarce. The Egyptians knew this, that there was this constant cycle of flooding and then getting less water and then more water, less water. And they were very clever about it because for two reasons. Well, first, they wanted to make sure that they have constant water supply. And what did they do? Imagine this. So here's your river coming down, and they dug some canals to the sides, right? And as this river flooded, the canals were filled with water. And as the water receded, they put a gate at the end of the canal, so the water that was in the canals could not flow back into the river. It stayed in the canal. A period of a year coming that when there was not enough water, this was a reservoir. It stayed there for them, and they could use that water for drinking, for their animals, and especially for watering the land, because then they knew there was some dry time coming. Now, so that was one wonderful invention of the Egyptians. Another thing they did, if you think about how this all works, so when the water comes out of the river, it's not just pure water. It doesn't look like the water that comes from your faucet. It's not clear water. If you've seen a river before, that water it's not perfectly see-through. There's little things floating in the water, very, very fine sand called silt. And silt is a wonderful material because when the river floods out of its banks and then the water recedes, that silt is like very fine sand. It settles down and it stays on the ground. So the water goes away, but the silt stays. And that silt creates a new layer of soil on top of the old soil. And that is the kind of soil that's very, very rich in nutrients. The same way that our bodies, we need proteins and vitamins and all the necessary nutrients, the kind of thing we get from our food, plants need food as well. And silt provides this wonderful, wonderful food for the plants. So very quickly, the farmers, the Egyptians, learned this, and they understood how even though the flood was an inconvenience each year, it was also very, very beneficial. So they admired the flood, but they also feared it. So what did they do? After the flood receded, while the ground was still somewhat wet and there was this wonderful silt sitting on top, this nutrient-rich soil, they would plant the seeds of the things they wanted to grow, for instance, wheat, and then they would water it from the canals, and then it would grow really nice, and they would have a nice harvest. So that was near the river. but they did not live near the river, because how could you live near the river if there was a flood coming every time? It would wash your house away. And I haven't seen a lot of pictures of houses on stilts. Maybe they didn't know how to do that really well, but most likely what we know about these Egyptians is they build their houses a little bit farther away from the river, and then they walk to the lands closer to the river, and that's where they did their farming. That is exactly how they lived. Most of their houses were built from stone. So they felt that this was a blessing to have a flood each year, and it helped them grow plants really well. And they were very good at using this natural phenomena. They actually used it to their advantage instead of being scared of it. So people lived in Upper Egypt and Lower Egypt, and Upper Egypt was somewhere of a richer part of Egypt. They seemed to be able to grow more food and do it better, and they eventually became a somewhat stronger tribe. So there were the Lower Egyptian tribes and the Upper Egyptian tribes. And the Lower Egyptian tribes were united under a king who wore a red crown. The red probably came from they like the red color, is the reddish color of the sand that you can find in the desert there, in the Sahara Desert, and I'll tell you a story about that later on. And then in Upper Egypt, the king wore a white crown. So you have a king with a red crown, and you have a king with a white crown. And these tribes in Upper Egypt and Lower Egypt often had fights because they wanted to get each other's territory. And for a long time, they were not really making much of a change in there, but eventually there came a king who was very, very powerful. His name was King Narmer, and he was a king of Upper Egypt wearing a white crown. And he was able to conquer Lower Egypt. And by conquering that, he united all the Egyptian tribes of Lower Egypt and Upper Egypt. And from now on, instead of wearing a white crown, because that only represented Upper Egypt, and instead of wearing a red crown, he combined the two crowns into one crown, a combined crown, a red and white crown. So that became a symbol of him being a king of both areas within Egypt. And I will show you now a picture of what that looked like. Here we go. So here he is. Okay. So here's the Upper Egypt crown. It's a white one. It's a long one. It doesn't look like the crowns we usually imagine in modern days. It's kind of all elongated, almost like a football. And then it has a cobra made from gold right here in the front above the forehead. And that cobra protects the king from enemies and also tells people, stay away. Now, Lower Egypt crown was red. There's a little swirly thing here. It was a little shorter. Also had the cobra. And then once King Narmer united Lower and Upper Egypt, he had a crown made that combines the two of them. Okay, so we have Upper Egypt and Lower Egypt combined. There was one more crown, actually a couple more crowns that were used by these Egyptian rulers, and one of them was called a blue crown. Guess why it's a blue crown? Because it was the color blue, and the blue crown was worn by the king when he was going to war. So this was his war crown. This is for the times when he went fighting. Okay, so my plan for today is I want to draw with you the white crown, the red crown, and then the combined crown. Okay, we can put this in your main lesson book right away, or you can make a draft first if you prefer. Right, so let's get some color pencils out and let's draw our crowns. And anyone who's not here today, like Isaac, you can just work on this after class. So I'm going to do this very simply. I'm going to draw 3 heads, 1, 2, and 3. And I'm going to draw a crown on each one of them. Okay, can you see this well, or do you need spotlighting? You're good? Okay. All right, so we're going to draw 3 heads with crowns, and then we're going to write down the name of each crown. So we can just start with like, you know, like a shoulder and a neck. We're not going to do the whole body, of course. We're just going to focus on the head because that's where the crown is. Okay, so shoulder and neck for 3 people. Right there, if you use a graphite pencil, you can easily adjust it at this point. Now, there's something I want to point out to you before we start drawing. This is very special and unique to Egypt. If you can look up for a moment and look at this picture here, this is how Egyptians drew people. When you look at the face, it's drew or painted from the side, right? You can see the cheek, one cheek, you can see the nose from one side, you can see the lips, and you can see the ear, right? So it's a profile picture, someone looking at me from the side. But when you look at the eye, is that really drawn from the side? Think about it. Is that what my eye looks like from the side? The eye is drawn from the front. It is something the Egyptians had not figured out how to do yet, right? It's just a little weird for us, but that is how they drew people. And look at the body. See how the body is drawn too? You see the chest as if you were looking at the person from the front, right? Kind of a really just a weird twisted position, but that was the best that the Egyptians could do. They did not know how else to draw people. This was their way of drawing a person. So we're going to do the same thing. We're going to draw a face from side profile, except for the eye and the eyebrow that we're going to do from the front. Okay, so let's do it. So first of all, we're going to start from the top, and this is where the crown is going to go. So first of all, we have a chin, which is roughly horizontal. So the chin comes out this way, and then it comes up, and then you have a nose, right? And then in between the chin and the nose, there are some lips. Okay, and I'm not expecting any kind of master drawing here, just something very simple so that it can be represented as the human head, and you can recognize it as the human head. All right, and then somewhere in between here, between the forehead and, we're going to draw an eye, and the eye is going to be drawn from the perspective of looking at it from the front. So you have an eye, and then you have an eyebrow. Okay, well, that's the best I can do today. It looks a little funny, but that's fine. Okay, Jacob, are you going to be drawing with us, or are you done with the head already? Okay, and then let's draw the ear. Okay, just a simple ear, because what I'm interested in is the crown itself. And the crown comes up, it starts at the forehead, right here. And it comes down kind of as a little thing in front of the ear. And then it goes behind the ear, comes down almost to the neck. And then it comes up like a big elongated, what do we call it? A football? Okay, something like that. And then it has the cobra. Okay. So that's your crown right there. Okay. And we're going to keep it white because that was the king's white crown. Okay, there you go. And this is called the white crown. And the word the Egyptians used for that was the Hedjet. And this represented Upper Egypt. Whoever wrote the crown was the king of Upper Egypt. And if you're done, you can use one of your skin colored pencils if you have that set. If not, you can just use like a whatever color you want to use for this, like a brownish color somewhere, some kind of a skin color. Okay, and then you can color that in. So that's our white. Okay, any questions, anyone? Does anyone need help? Okay, so Ellie, what you did there with the blurred background, I think that's perfect. It works much better than the other one. All right, next one. Any questions there? Can you see it well enough to be able to draw it? Yeah, okay. All right, then now the next person's head is going to be exactly the same because it's just a person. But the crown is going to be different. I'm not going to worry too much about the head. I just want to make sure that the eye is drawn in that same way. And the eyebrow. And then this person has the red crown. And the red crown comes up like this. Comes up pretty high. Right there. And it also has the serpent. Or cobra. Okay, and this we're going to color in using red. And it comes down a little bit before the ear. And then it goes back behind the ear, kind of like your little earpieces that you use for listening to music. Okay, so that's the red crown. And if you were able to draw both the red crown and the white crown, then you'll be able to draw the combined crown easily. And this had a little thing come out of it, like a little twirly thing. Starts a little wider at the bottom, and then it gets in the skin there, right there. Okay, so that's our red crown. And the red crown was called a dashret. So we have the white crown, the red crown, and then finally I'm going to draw the combined crown. Okay, so again, we're going to start with the head, with a simple face. The lips. A nose. The Egyptian eye. And then we'll have the combined crown. And the combined crown, of course, has the serpent or the cobra as well. Hey, questions, anyone? Let me know. Okay, the third has somehow became much bigger. I don't know what happened there. Okay, Ireland, yes.
Will you please take a picture of this? I'm a little behind.
I did. I already did. I already did an earlier drawing, and that's posted in the Google Classroom. Okay, and then here's a little twirly thing coming out of it. Yes, Ellie?
But since it's from the side, it makes it kind of looks like a cyclops.
Mhm. Yeah. Okay, so here we are. And then this here is called the double crown. And it's a symbol of the unification of ancient Egypt.